All right, so you've got this big stack of stuff about Mehmed II, Mehmed the Conqueror, and you're probably wondering where to even begin.
Well, that's what we're here for,
Exactly.
to help you sort through it all.
We're going to do a deep dive into all this info you sent us. Looks like a lot of Wikipedia excerpts.
Yeah.
And pull out the most interesting stuff about this really pivotal sultan.
Yeah, he was a fascinating figure. It really straddles two worlds, both ending an era and beginning a new one.
He does. And, just reading the basic timeline of his life, you get a sense of the drama already.
Oh, absolutely.
Born in 1432,
Yep.
right in the heart of the rising Ottoman Empire, but then becomes sultan for the first time at just 12 years old. Like, what?
Yeah, that's crazy.
What does that even do to a kid to have that kind of power that young?
Well, it's almost impossible to imagine, but we do know that the education of Ottoman princes was just incredibly rigorous.
Right.
It wasn't just, learning poetry and horseback riding.
Yeah.
They were being groomed for leadership from a very early age.
Wow.
Government, military strategy, Islamic law, all just drilled into them.
So in a way, it's not surprising that he had his eye on Constantinople, even as a teenager.
Right.
I mean, the city had been this almost mythical prize for the Ottomans for generations.
Absolutely. And, it represented something much bigger than just territory.
Oh, yeah.
This was Constantinople we're talking about.
Yeah.
The heart of the Byzantine Empire.
Right.
The last vestige of the Roman world in the East.
So taking it.
It wasn't just about expanding. It was about claiming a legacy.
Wow.
Stepping into the shoes of the Caesars.
Okay, so that ambition is brewing, even from a young age. But then there's this setback. His father, Murad II, has to come back and take over the throne after a military defeat.
Yeah.
I bet that stung for Mehmed II.
It must have. And, some historians believe that this experience, this brief loss of power, actually fueled his determination even more.
Oh, interesting.
It showed him, the fragility of power and the need for absolute control if he wanted to succeed.
Yeah, like a wake-up call almost.
Exactly.
Okay, so fast forward a few years, he's 21, back on the throne, and launches this massive siege on Constantinople in 1453. This is where the conqueror title really takes hold, right?
Oh, absolutely. And what's fascinating is that he didn't just rely on brute force.
Right.
I mean, yes, he had massive
Great civilization.
It's a bittersweet victory, for sure.
Yeah, it's almost poetic, right?
Yeah, very much so.
And then not long after, he declares himself Caesar of Rome. It wasn't just about conquering the city. It was about absorbing its symbolic power, claiming that Roman legacy for himself and the Ottoman Empire.
And what's interesting is that this claim wasn't entirely dismissed out of hand.
Really?
Some European rulers, particularly in the West,
Right.
they didn't recognize him as the legitimate Caesar, of course.
Of course.
But the fact that it was even debated shows how much this conquest shifted the balance of power.
Right.
The Ottomans were no longer just this regional threat.
Yeah.
They were now a major player on the world stage, with ambitions that extended far beyond their current borders.
And those ambitions, they didn't stop with Constantinople, did they?
No, they did not.
So where do we go from here?
Well, let's talk about what he set his sights on next. His ambitions definitely didn't stop with Constantinople.
So what was next on his to-conquer list after taking such a symbolic prize?
Well, I think securing his borders was key.
Makes sense.
He knew that a sprawling empire like the Ottoman Empire needed stable frontiers if it was going to thrive.
Right.
So he turned his attention to consolidating his power in the Balkans.
Okay.
Going after places like the Despotate of Morea in Greece.
Oh, yeah.
Which held, strategic importance in the Peloponnese Peninsula.
So he's thinking like a chess player taking out potential threats.
Exactly.
Fortifying his position.
Yeah, and this is where we really see his military genius come into play again.
Okay, how so?
He wasn't just throwing troops at a problem.
Yeah.
He was carefully calculating his moves, choosing his targets based on their strategic value and long-term goals for the empire.
So it wasn't just the Balkans, right? I remember reading about his campaigns against the Empire of Trebizond, which was all the way over on the Black Sea coast.
Yeah, taking Trebizond was crucial for controlling those vital Black Sea trade routes.
Got it.
Plus, it eliminated another potential rival for power in the region
Right.
and added to the growing prestige of the Ottoman Empire.
So it really was all about strategy.
Oh yeah, every move was calculated.
It almost feels like Mehmed II was playing a grand strategy game.
Right.
Expanding his empire piece by piece.
He was a master strategist for sure.
But, some of his campaigns, especially the one against Vlad III Dracula,
Oh yes.
were notoriously brutal.
Yeah, the conflict with Vlad III was, well, it was exceptionally bloody,
Understandable.
even for those times.
Right.
Vlad, also known as Vlad the Impaler.
For obvious reasons.
Yeah, for his preferred method of dealing with his enemies was a formidable adversary.
Huh?
He ruled Wallachia, which bordered the Ottoman Empire and was constantly being pulled between, different powers vying for control.
So this was a really strategic region.
Oh, absolute.
And Vlad was right in the middle of it.
Yes, and he was not afraid to use any means necessary to maintain his power.
I read about Vlad's infamous night raid on Mehmed II's camp.
Oh, yeah, that's a crazy story.
Let's talk about bold.
I mean, sneaking into the Sultan's tent with just a small force.
Wow.
Almost killing him.
It's insane.
It really is. It's a story that's become legendary, highlighting both Vlad's ruthlessness and his military cunning.
Yeah. But it also underscores the dangers that Mehmed II faced, even at the height of his success.
Even as the conqueror of Constantinople.
There were still threats to his power.
Oh, yeah. There were always enemies lurking in the shadows.
So how do we reconcile this image of Mehmed II as this brilliant strategist and a patron of the arts with the brutality of some of his campaigns?
Well, that's the question, isn't it?
Was he just a product of his time, or was there something more to it?
It's a complex question. On one hand, you can't ignore the historical context.
Of course.
This was a time of constant warfare where rulers had to be ruthless to survive.
Right.
But on the other hand, Mehmed II wasn't just reacting to threats.
Yeah.
He was actively shaping the world around him,
Right.
pursuing his own vision of a powerful and unified Ottoman Empire.
So what does that vision look like beyond military conquests?
Well, let's go back to Constantinople.
Okay.
He's rebuilding the city, repopulating it, and surprisingly, promoting a degree of religious tolerance.
It seems like a contradiction, doesn't it?
It might seem that way, but it actually speaks to his pragmatism as a ruler.
Okay.
I mean, yes, he saw himself as a champion of Islam,
Sure.
but he also understood that a diverse empire needed a certain level of flexibility to function.
Right.
This is where the millet system comes in.
So what exactly was the millet system?
Well, it was essentially a way to grant different religious communities within the empire,
Like who?
primarily Christians and Jews,
Okay.
a degree of self-governance.
So they could.
They could practice their faith, maintain their own courts and legal systems, even collect taxes.
Wow.
All under the oversight of the Sultan, of course.
Right. So it was a way to keep everyone relatively happy, avoid major uprisings, and maintain stability.
Exactly. A very shrewd political move.
That sounds like it.
That allowed him to focus on, expanding his empire.
Yeah.
Without having to constantly worry about internal conflicts.
Sorry.
But it's also important to remember that this tolerance had its limits.
Of course.
Mehmed II could still be ruthless in dealing with any perceived threats to his authority,
right,
regardless of religious affiliation.
So a mix of pragmatism and ruthlessness.
Exactly.
A ruler who could be both tolerant and tyrannical depending on the circumstances.
Yeah, and that complexity is what makes him such a fascinating figure to study.
I agree.
We tend to want to put historical figures into neat boxes.
Right.
But Mehmed II just defies easy categorization.
He does.
He was a man of contradictions, driven by both lofty ideals and very pragmatic considerations.
So a real person.
Exactly.
And it's in those contradictions that we can find the real story of his life and his reign.
I think so.
And speaking of contradictions, we haven't even touched on his love of art and learning.
Oh, right.
It seems strange to think of a fearsome conqueror poring over ancient manuscripts.
Yeah.
Or commissioning portraits from Renaissance artists.
Right, but that was actually a key part of his vision for the Ottoman Empire.
Really?
He didn't just want to conquer, he wanted to create a new center of culture and learning, a
Oh.
worthy successor to the Byzantine Empire.
So it wasn't just about military power, it was about cultural influence and prestige.
Absolutely, he wanted it all.
And this is where his patronage of the arts comes in.
Exactly.
He invited scholars and artists from all over the known world to his court.
Creating this vibrant intellectual atmosphere.
He even commissioned the famous Italian painter Gentile Bellini
Yes.
to come to Constantinople and paint his portrait.
I mean, that's a pretty big statement.
A sultan commissioning a portrait from an Italian Renaissance master.
Exactly. It speaks to Mehmed II's desire to position himself and the Ottoman Empire within a larger cultural context.
Yeah, not just some barbarian warlord.
Right. He was a patron of the arts, a scholar in his own right,
Wow.
a man who appreciated the finer things in life.
And it wasn't just paintings.
Yep.
He also amassed a huge library, right?
Did.
I remember reading about it being filled with books in all sorts of languages,
Yeah.
Greek, Persian, Latin, even Arabic.
Yeah, his library was legendary.
It sounds like it.
A testament to his intellectual curiosity and his desire to preserve knowledge from different cultures.
He sounds like quite the Renaissance man.
He was ahead of his time in many ways.
So we've got this incredibly complex figure,
Yeah.
a brilliant military strategist, a ruthless conqueror, a patron of the arts, and a scholar who surrounded himself with books. It's hard to wrap your head around it all.
It really is. He was a man of many talents and ambitions.
And we haven't even talked about his administrative reforms.
Oh, right.
The way he restructured the Ottoman government
Yeah.
to centralize power and create a more efficient bureaucracy.
He was a reformer as well as a conqueror.
So tell me more about these reforms. What did he actually change, and how did it impact the way the empire was run?
Well, one of the most significant changes he made was to the Divan,
Okay.
which was essentially the imperial council.
Like his advisors.
Exactly. He restructured it, appointing officials based on merit and loyalty.
So not just who you were related to.
Exactly. He understood that a strong, centralized government needed competent and loyal officials to function effectively.
Right.
And he wasn't afraid to break with tradition to achieve that goal.
Interesting.
He also codified laws, established clear lines of authority, and standardized salaries for government officials.
Wow. Talk about a micromanager.
Well, he wanted to make sure things were running smoothly.
It sounds like he was really trying to create a more modern, efficient bureaucracy.
He was. And those reforms had a lasting impact on the Ottoman Empire.
How so?
They helped to solidify its power and ensure its stability for centuries to come.
Interesting.
He understood that military conquest was just one part of the equation. You need a solid foundation, a well-run government, to truly build a lasting empire.
It's amazing how much he accomplished in his lifetime.
It really is.
And it's a good reminder that history is rarely simple.
Absolutely.
Even figures like Mehmed II, known for their military exploits, were often complex individuals with diverse interests and motivations.
Yeah, they were real people with flaws and contradictions just like us.
It makes them more interesting to study.
For sure.
So after all this, what do you think? What stands out to you as Mehmed II's most enduring legacy?
Oh, that's a tough one.
I know there's so much to choose from.
I mean, the conquest of Constantinople alone was a monumental event.
Yeah, it changed the world.
It reshaped the political and cultural landscape of Europe and the Middle East.
For sure.
But I think his impact goes beyond any single event.
I agree.
He transformed the Ottoman Empire, not just through military might, but through administrative reforms, cultural patronage, and a strategic vision that extended far beyond his own lifetime.
He was thinking long-term.
He left behind a legacy of power, ambition, and intellectual curiosity that continues to fascinate and inspire us today.
I agree. He was a man who truly embodied the spirit of his age, a time of great change and upheaval where old empires crumbled and new ones rose to take their place.
And Mehmed II was right there at the center of it all, shaping the world according to his own vision.
And that vision, as we've seen, was complex and multifaceted.
Oh, for sure.
He was a man of contradictions, capable of great brutality and surprising tolerance, driven by both ambition and a genuine desire to build a lasting legacy.
And I think that's what makes him such a compelling figure to study.
Yeah, you can't just put him in a box.
Exactly. He reminds us that history is rarely black and white, and even the most powerful individuals are shaped by forces beyond their control.
Okay, so we've talked a lot about Mehmed the Conqueror, the Sultan, the art lover, but what about the everyday people?
Right, the people who actually lived under his rule.
Yeah, what was life actually like in the Ottoman Empire under Mehmed II?
Well, it really depended on who you were and where you lived. For the citizens of Constantinople, especially after the conquest, things were complicated.
I can imagine.
I mean, Mehmed II, he wanted to repopulate the city,
Right.
make it a thriving capital again.
So how did he do that?
He offered incentives for people to move there.
Like what?
Tax breaks, opportunities for trade, things like that.
And who are we talking about here who's moving to Constantinople?
Muslims, Christians, Jews, a pretty diverse mix, actually.
Which seems a little at odds with the whole ruthless conqueror image.
Right. It's one of those contradictions that makes Mehmed II so fascinating.
Yeah.
But remember, he was a pragmatist. A stable, prosperous city benefits everyone.
Right.
Plus, he saw himself as a successor to the Roman emperors.
Yeah.
And Constantinople was key to that legacy.
So did it work? Did this tolerance actually play out in real life?
To a degree. I mean, the millet system, which we talked about earlier, allowed different religious communities to maintain their own laws and customs.
So a certain level of autonomy.
Exactly. But they were still ultimately under the Sultan's authority.
Sounds like a delicate balancing act.
Oh, it was. And it wasn't always perfect.
Sure.
There were still tensions, conflicts.
Yeah.
And Mehmed II could be ruthless in suppressing any dissent.
Of course, power is power.
Right. But for the most part, this system allowed for a level of coexistence that was pretty remarkable for the time.
Yeah, that's pretty interesting. It makes you think about the daily lives of people back then. Shopkeepers, artisans, farmers.
Yeah.
Did Mehmed II's policies actually have like a direct impact on them?
Absolutely. He reformed the tax system, standardized weights and measures, even invested in infrastructure projects like roads and aqueducts.
Wow.
All of these things would have had a tangible effect on the lives of ordinary people.
So he wasn't just focused on grand conquest and building palaces.
No, he was also thinking about the nuts and bolts of running an empire.
Yeah, making sure things ran smoothly.
Exactly, and that's what made him such an effective ruler. He had a vision for a powerful and prosperous Ottoman Empire.
Right.
And he understood that achieving that vision required attention to detail, a strong administrative system, and a stable society.
It's amazing how all these different pieces fit together.
Yeah, it's all connected.
The military campaigns, the cultural patronage, the administrative reforms, it all adds up to a pretty impressive legacy.
It does. And I think it's important to remember that Mehmed II wasn't just a conqueror. He was a builder.
A builder?
Yeah, he took a fledgling empire and transformed it into a major power.
Wow.
Laying the foundation for a dynasty that would last for centuries.
I think we've covered a lot of ground here.
We have.
From his early life to his lasting impact, I feel like I have a much better understanding of who Mehmed II was and what he accomplished.
Me too. And it's a reminder that history isn't just about names and dates.
Yeah.
It's about understanding the complex individuals who shaped our world and the forces that drove them.
So what's the final takeaway for our listener? What should they be thinking about as they put down those books and articles?
I think the biggest takeaway is that Mehmed II was a man of contradictions.
For sure.
He was a brilliant military strategist and a patron of the arts, a ruthless conqueror and a shrewd administrator. He was a product of his time, but he also transcended it.
Yeah.
Leaving behind a legacy that continues to fascinate and challenge us today.
Well said.
What do you think his greatest impact was?
Yeah. What do you think?
That's something worth pondering.
It is. And on that note, I think we've given our listeners plenty to chew on.
We have.
So until next time, thanks for joining us for another deep dive.